As the first day of the Queensland floods inquiry kicked off, IAG Australia's chief, Mike Wilkins, was giving his perspective at a Cedar lunch in Sydney. Of 35,000 claims from recent events, IAG anticipates paying out over 97%. But that hasn't stopped a backlash against insurers from the Prime Minister downwards. I spoke to Mike Wilkins earlier. Mike Wilkins, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Now, you say that IAG would insure for floods in Queensland if flood mapping were available.
That's right. What I've committed today is that when appropriate flood mapping becomes available both in Queensland and Victoria, IAG will offer flood insurance cover, as we do in all other states of Australia now.
Now, this is the issue, isn't it? This ability to do the mapping. Some local councils in Queensland, I understand, have got flood mapping done, but they won't provide the data. What's the reason they're giving you?
Look, what they're saying is that it's not appropriate for our purposes. We think that some of the local councils in Queensland have been quite proactive and forthcoming with their data. Others simply don't have it, but we do think that there are others that have got it but are withholding it for their own purposes.
But is this a legal issue?
Potentially, but I think you'd be better placed actually asking those councils that do have it but that haven't made it available rather than us speculating on it.
Because it might impact presumably the value of the land that they're mapping and that sort of thing?
Well, I think there's always an issue where people have built on floodplains, particularly if they're not aware of that. Then what that does do is clearly goes to the value of the land and hence rating and other factors.
Let me draw your attention to what Patrick Snowball at Suncorp said in February. He says there's no excuse for insurers not to offer flood coverage. It comes down to the commercial and the marketing decisions and not the lack of flood mapping or bad land zoning.
Oh, look, I can't comment on Patrick nor on the standards that Suncorp might apply in terms of looking for how it assesses flood and flood risk. What I can do is speak for IAG, and what I've said today is that we will offer flood cover when we've got adequate mapping available to us.
You are competitors of Suncorp, though, and in some ways they look to be taking advantage of this from a PR point of view. They're saying they're happy to do their own flood mapping and offer flood insurance, and that it's a matter of risk. Why won't IAG match this?
Well, I think we need to be able to understand the risk that we're being presented with so that we can accurately price that risk. Yes, IAG and Suncorp are competitors, although I think that the performance of both organisations throughout the recent crises has been quite exemplary.
A few years ago, you proposed a standard definition of a flood. Is that worth revisiting now?
Well, certainly it is. We were disappointed as an industry when that was rejected by the ACCC and consumers about 3 years ago. The industry has been in discussion with the Assistant Treasurer around a standard definition, and in fact last week a discussion document was put out by the Assistant Treasurer. The industry fully supports a standard definition. We think that's in the interests of consumers and will help with certainty in a number of cases.
What was your reaction last week when the Prime Minister called you cowardly for not facing up to flood victims? Because CGU was very much in the crosshairs there.
Look, I think that some of the short-term discussion has been disappointing, but what we're interested in doing is actually concentrating on the longer-term solution here. We have been dealing with our customers and speaking to them quite regularly about their claims, trying to give them as much certainty as we can, and also making them well aware of the dispute resolution mechanisms, both internal and external, that are available to them.
Has the problem been in the past not communicating to customers what is not in the policy, what's not covered?
Look, I think there's certainly an issue around that, in that the disclosure documents that the industry provides are probably too long.
How is it that some customers believe that they were sold a fairly comprehensive package and yet they find themselves high and dry when it comes to claiming things?
Well, I think that's always an issue that we're going to face, because people do forget the disclosures that have been made available to them, particularly after we've had long periods without significant perils events. Unfortunately, over recent weeks we've seen a number of those perils come to the fore, and people are then starting to look at their policies and realising in some cases that they have been built on floodplains and they're not available.
How do you unravel if a property has had some stormwater damage and some river flood damage? How do you unravel what is claimable and what's not? Because it appears that none of it's claimable, because the view of the insurer will be that this is river flooding.
It's a very vexed situation there. What we can see in terms of water inundation, which is what you're speaking about as opposed to flooding, usually occurs almost simultaneously with the event. Flooding, you find find is usually water overflowing from the banks of a watercourse or some other man-made position, sometimes coming several hours after the rain has stopped. We, like most others in the industry, actually use hydrologists, and we do place great store on the information that hydrologists are able to give us about a flood event or about a stormwater event for that matter.
You're proposing today an awful lot of infrastructure as part of the adapting to these natural disasters. It's a pretty lousy time with a tight budget.
Well, it is, but I think that we're talking about the long-term future of our nation here, and we simply can't continue to go through the sort of processes that we've been through with the natural events that we've had recently. It's a considerable drain on the budget, just with the relief and other payments that are being made. What we've proposed today is a 5-step proposal to actually look at better land use planning, better building standards, to equip the community with a better understanding of what they're looking at, and also to invest significantly in flood and other mitigation infrastructures, which we think will be to the long-term benefit of the community, but also there's a short-term benefit because it also promotes economic activity here and now.
Mike Wilkins, I thank you very much for coming in and joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.